Welcome, one and all, to Monday Mornings with Matt and Kevin. We hope you're enjoying your second full week of Lent. Monday mornings. It's been a pretty good one so far for me. It's only been a week and a half, but it's actually been a nice, beneficial one. I hope that I can keep building on that. I know that for me, if it starts well, it tends to end well. And I think so far it's been a good one. It's been not too much. I've done years where it's been too much. This year's been just about right. So that's been pretty nice. Today, Matt and I are talking about a couple different topics. We're going to talk about what we determine to be a high value woman and a high value man from our opinions, and also the opinion of my wife as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about Bergoglio and an upcoming live stream that I have with Mr. Mario Dirksen of Nova Sordo Watch, which I'm super excited about. And Matt has a very controversial text message coming in from Great Britain, our buddies over there in England. And it's pretty eye-opening. So, Matt, how are you doing?
Yeah, hey Kev. Mentioning that the Lent, for me, my biggest problem as an Italian is the food. I snack, I pick. So these weeks have been such a discipline for me that it's kind of like now that it's Sunday and the penances are lifted, I don't have that desire anymore. So, which is kind of weird. Only, what did you say? We're like a week and a half in here. So hopefully, good habits being formed. But I've been doing all right with it. Days like today, like I said, where we are free to kind of, eat, the penances are lifted. I have, kind of habitually said like, no, I'm good. I'll wait until my next portions are smaller too, for me. So we'll see if I wither away to nothing by the time Lent is over. I made this tweet. It was like, do you want to lose 60 pounds in 40 days? Convert to traditional Catholicism. You don't need Jenny Craig.
Honestly, though, I know a lot of people who gain weight during Lent because they just hammer in that big meal and just eat and eat and eat.
Yeah,
and I know good friends like that. It's kind of cheating, yeah. But I understand you starve yourself. But I think some people even weigh their meals. I think maybe my friends was it Australia? They weigh it by the gram. That's intense. I mean, I don't do that, but I think it is kind of the spirit and letter of the law. I mean, I think we should. I mean, the entire point is to suffer a little bit and to make our will stronger, to not give in to our will and to our bodily desires. Which brings us to the next topic. Unless you have more comments, sorry.
You want to? No, I was just going to say it just makes me think of how really dependent we are on grace. These sins of weakness. It is how much easier it is to be a glutton than it is to practice temperance. Like, man, it really just brings out how reliant we are on God's grace. Otherwise, we're nothing but vice, really.
Right. Okay, so it brings us to the next topic of high value women, and this comes from I suppose a friend to the show, someone who's been on the show, a very controversial gal over there on Twitter.
She enjoys it.
She enjoys being controversial. Yeah, I don't know if she's listening to this, but I know she enjoys controversy. But she tweeted something about high values in women. I think she had 4 or 5 points about what that means. Matt, do you want to read that tweet?
Yeah. So her tweet goes, how to know if you are a high value woman. Point 1 is your BMI is less than 23, in case you might want to have to Google that. You can make at least 3 delicious meals from scratch. You can hold an interesting conversation on any topic. Point 4, children and animals and old people trust you. And last but not least, you are not on birth control, weed, or SSRIs, or any drugs whatsoever.
Now, I think you and I probably would both agree that some of those are obviously good values to have. I mean, not being on birth control, et cetera, shows that you have, you are reasonable when it comes to, who you're sleeping with, I suppose, which obviously should be kept for marriage. And, I think a couple of them they're solid, I think. But, I think that what really opened my eyes was pretty clear. There's no mention of godliness or really of virtue. There are a couple of those things that you might say are virtuous, like the point of women and children are comfortable with you. I think that means you must have some sort of virtue and kindness. But I thought that the list was pretty lacking in terms of actual character.
Yeah, it's a really good example of naturalism, right? Where we don't look at the spiritual realm at all. We view ourselves as nothing but natural human persons. And so things that are a bit more superficial or of the flesh are suddenly of the highest value to us, right? And I remember a quote this was from Ripperger years ago when I used to listen to all of his talks. He has a really good talk, I think, regardless of other issues. It's called How to Raise a Man, and in it, he says this is some points that he gives to men. He said, "I don't care if you have to put a paper bag over her head. If she's virtuous, you will be happy." And not that you want to date or marry anyone ugly. You have to make children with them, so there needs to be an attraction level in there. But it really speaks volumes as to how much we really need that virtue more than anything. As you said, good points. I mean, I think women should be inclined to be able to cook, especially again coming from a background, probably even a European background. Combined cooking is very big, right? Yeah, birth control. Obviously, these are mortal sins, and this is what we kind of lack here. Is when you have things that are sinful, or you engage in things that are sinful, you're not going to be happy. You just can't. It just doesn't work out that way. You can't sin and you can't be happy because you're working in a way that's opposed to God's design, His natural law. So it's one of the reasons why they say, you either pray the rosary or you'll sin, because you can't do both. One or the other is going to give up in one way or the other. So yeah, I think this completely naturalistic look casts aside things that are more important. Obviously, do you share a common faith? It has to be number one,
right? Exactly, and so I asked my wife, who's awesome. I asked her what are her points, and I said she's limited to 4 points, which is pretty tough, obviously, to what makes a high value woman. And this is just obviously her opinion. And she and I talked through this a little bit, so there might be a little bit of my opinion, but this is mostly from my wife. And she said number 1 point is God fearing. So exactly as you said, if someone is not God fearing or doesn't put any seriousness behind God or her faith. Now, I of course this should be Catholic faith. I think we would agree with that. But I think especially if it's someone who doesn't have any faith at all, I'm not saying that you absolutely can't marry them. That's not up to me to say. But boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, that has to be the number 1 point to a high value woman, because morality and goodness and truth is all based off of God. It's based off of our faith and based off what we've been taught through our Catholic faith, especially. And I think that for us, that's the number one that you have to have first to be a high value woman. You have to be God fearing.
Yeah, I think especially with raising kids, having children, you have to be united on that front. A house that's divided will not stand. That's in scripture. And I mean, if you can't share the same faith and instill that in your children, you're going to have a lot of conflict. I think there are a lot of people who have shared their experiences with interfaith, mixed marriages, whatever, and if they're serious about their faith, it really doesn't work. It just comes down to arguments, disagreements. People say we coexist, or we happily tend to each other's needs, and we kind of let the other person do their own thing. But that's really like the opposite of marriage. Imagine having a separate faith from your husband or wife. Like you don't go to mass together, or even if you do, it's like one has one faith and the other has another. It just, how can you function as a couple, as one flesh, which is what marriage is? How do you work that out? It just seems impossible. And I know that there are ways, I guess, where you can get exceptions, but for the most part, just without being united in the Catholic faith, and really more than that is turning to the sacraments. I don't know what's next on your list, but not only sharing that same faith, but being dependent on the sacraments, being dependent on saying the rosary together, novenas together, providing your catechism to children. How do you explain to them that, like, yeah, my spouse doesn't share what I'm teaching you? That has to be very confusing and difficult for children to say, well, you're telling me that this is true and mom doesn't believe it.
Right. Like, exactly. Right.
What a stumbling block.
We kind of generalized a very big topic with just God fearing, which means exactly as you said, that needs to mean you're wanting to teach the sacraments, wanting to teach catechism, etc. So number 2, and I'm going to do a sneak peek into the men's section. The number 1 point is also God fearing. So the number 1 point for both men and women is, having to have that importance behind God and faith in the practicing of your religion. Now, number 2, for women, what makes a valuable woman, according to my wife, number 2, she takes joy in her role as a nurturer. Takes joy in her role as a nurturer. Now, this is one that I think feminists out there are losing their minds and say, what does that even mean, nurturer? Well, and I think it's a really good point that it's women who, of course, as a mother or as a nun, as a sister, or even as a single person, which sometimes happens, that is that's what a woman is built by God to be, and to not just take that and say this is my role, but to take it joyfully and to take it, as your vocation. That is my wife's number 2 point of a woman of high value.
Yeah, it makes me think as you were saying that too, when you're young, right, and so, and something goes wrong, or you're hurt, or you're scared, your inclination is to want to go to your mom. And the reason I think for that is because mothers raise these children, their children in their wombs for those 9 months, where there's such an intimate connection, where that's all they know. They know their mother's voice, they know their mother's. There's just so many senses about the mother, that just are unmatched. I've seen like these miraculous videos where these babies are born with an illness or with a deficiency or whatever, and simply by putting them on the mother's shoulder, the baby like revives or comes back to life, and it's just that healing gentleness, which is we see manifested perfectly in Our Lady, right? If she is the perfect woman, she was perfectly gentle and nurturing and soft, and these the nature of woman is just so beautiful, and it's endearing. And so to have that in a woman, there's a saying, it's like, fall into the softness of a woman that loves you. And I think no matter how hard we try as men, we're not made for that. We can't do that. We can't offer that. We don't have that in us. No matter what kind of makeup we put on or surgeries we get, we just don't have it. We're just not designed that way.
Well, my wife, and I guess I'll skip over again to the men's section, to what makes a virtuous man, I suppose, a man of high value. And her second point for a man is to take joy in a role as a provider and protector. And so again, that's the opposite. It's just the opposite side. That's how God made us. He made us to provide and protect in many different ways. That doesn't just mean physically or monetarily. That also means, of course, psychologically, and if most importantly, spiritually, and to protect them and their well-being and protect their innocence and protect their souls. And that, again, is the role God gave us. Now, that is also, of course, the role of a priest, and should be, in some cases, in some ways, the role of a single man in society as well. It is our vocation. It is what we are built to be, biologically even. Now, I'm sure plenty of people in the world today would disagree with that, but it's the case. Why are we stronger? Why are we bigger and faster? And there's a lot of reasons, and part of it is to be able to protect and to provide.
Even you look back at the fall, right? Oh, how many of our problems go back to that moment in time? Satan, I said this before. All of them, right? you can't avoid it. Satan knew that if he could get Eve, that he can get Adam, and this was part of that inverse, part of that that play on emotion, where Adam was faced with the situation, right? He knew right and wrong. God told him. God said, "Don't eat of the fruit of the tree." He knew what natural law entailed here, with reason. But his wife, through the temptation of Satan, offered him the fruit. So now Adam was faced with two decisions here. Either I upset my wife, right? Either I don't listen to her, or I violate God's law. And he was faced with this. And that is one of the things that really just was in my mind anyway, the hallmark of the fall, was that he gave into the pleasures of listening to his wife, rather than, that's the key phrase, rather than doing what God ordained him to do. And that's where masculinity, that's the hallmark of it, right? Being able to look at pleasure in the face and maintaining your interior self-discipline. Like I said earlier, it's easier to be a glutton than it is to be someone who wants to snack all day. Like,
well, and Matt,
very easy to do.
That has to segue into my third point for men.
Sure.
I'm kind of going all over the place, but it's a perfect segue.
No, it's good. It's good.
Her third point for what makes a virtuous man or a high value man is to be in control of your desires. That means food, sex, fitness, etc. And so it really is exactly as you said. It is that control of self, and it's something that, again, we just don't see in society. If it's with obesity, if it's with the carnal desires, it's something that since the fall of man, since the fall of Adam, exactly as you say, that's what we see as a weakness. And it's something that society, especially look at Hollywood. I mean, especially a man who is able to, how do you say it, conquer multiple women. That's a manly thing. This is a good thing to be able to do. And of course it's not, because as we know, the actual proof of a medal of a man is to be able to hold, to overcome your actual physical, desires and to overcome your will. That is true tough manliness.
And it's rooted on the word effeminacy, right? Which people wrongly misinterpret to mean feminine. But I believe it was Aquinas who defined effeminacy as being the inability to put aside your pleasure in order to pursue what's difficult. Let me say that again. Effeminacy is the inability to put aside your pleasure in order to pursue what is difficult. I'm almost positive that's how Aquinas defined it. And how true is that related to the point you just made? To be able to put aside what we want, what we feel, how we any satisfaction that we want to or just provide to ourselves, is it something that we can deny? And I think too, kind of merging 1 and 2 here in your, or 2 and 3 in your points, when a woman sees that a guy can put aside how he feels to do what he has to do anyway, she's immediately attracted to that, because she sees like, oh, hey, this is the guy who's not going to, be ruled by his emotions. There's a guy who's not going to be ruled by his desires or his weaknesses or his temptations, but he's going to do what he has to do anyway. And again, it all ties in. These are vices. These are sins of weakness, right? Not of malice, like anger or, anything else like that of sort, but weakness. Our flesh is weak. All a result, going back again, as we said, to the fall. So you have to look at the spiritual aspect. I don't know what your next point is, but how do we conquer that? Obviously, we can do nothing outside of grace. St. Paul said this. The church has taught this. All the saints echo this. If you don't have the mass and the sacraments and a prayer life, like, man, you're out there in the woods.
But I think that, to me, that all goes back to point number 1, right? God fearing. So
Yeah,
really, that has to be number 1, because if you don't put God first, if you're not a good Christian person with high morals, then none of these things are ever going to happen. Right? Rarely, not never, but they're going to be much, much harder because you don't have the grace from God to accomplish them. So, boy, it's hard to. These both work as a segue. But I'll go back to the women. So number 3,
yeah,
point
sure.
number 3 for the women is modesty. Now, that is to be dignified, but also well kept and presentable. Now, modesty does not just mean you're wearing baggy clothes with up to your wrist and up to your chin. Now, it does of course mean that you should be careful how you dress and have a Marian standard of what you wear, because you don't want to be an occasion of sin. But it also means, and this was a very big point of my wife, that it also means that you need to dress and look nice. You need to have your face cleaned. You need to be, you need to, not be dirty. Your hair can't be greasy. You can't be looking like a ragamuffin going out there, because that is also not dignified. It's also not actually modest. I think that's a part of the coin that's often missed.
And I think to add to that too, speech for me, a modesty in speech. I was listening to it was an interview from I don't know if it was the 30s or the 40s, so some time ago, and the language used in this interview was very eloquent, and it was very well poised and well put together, and very intelligent, like very articulate and just well delivered. And it made me think like the two people who were speaking had a really good decorum over their language, over the way they spoke. And you think back, like I always kind of resort to Our Lady and Saint Joseph. I'm sure that Our Lady was very modest, of course, in her dress, but in the way she spoke, or in the way she, how did she? Because she was human still, right? She didn't suffer from concupiscence, but she had human emotion. She was sad. She was angry. She had these things. How did she handle them in that umbrella of modesty? Right? Was she interiorly just at peace, like St. Joseph probably was as well, where just the words that they spoke to one another were always endearing, were always gentle, were always charitable more than anything. So again, really straight to your number 1 point, Kevin, God-fearing. It just swoops kind of all the way down and covers all of these virtues. And when you go back to that original point, it seems like the rest kind of falls into place, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you are truly God-fearing and truly godly, then absolutely, because everything else absolutely does fall in line. The 4th point for women is to be selfless and not egoistic. And I think that has a lot to do with the modesty, as you said, how you speak, how you see yourself. And that doesn't mean that you're downtrodden and sullen, but it just means that you are, again, you're a nurturer, right? So think of yourself as a godly nurturer, which also should mean that you are selfless, right? It's part of nurturing. I would say that you care more about those around you than you care about yourself. And I think that is a very womanly mindset, and it should be men too, but I think especially women, and I think your best mothers and your greatest heroines of history, that was the hallmark of who they were. They were selfless and heroic because of their selflessness.
It makes me think of the wedding at Cana, right? Who noticed that there was no wine? The women did,
Right.
because the men are over there partying and having a good time and probably making conversation, playing games and all that, and it was the women who were keeping an eye on everything, right? Probably we read about the wine, but there was probably a lot more to it, and I think the mystics have kind of given us some insight on the wedding at Cana, but they probably, made sure that everybody was comfortable, that the place was clean. If something was on the floor, they probably picked it up. Like a very selfless nature about them. And that, again, is part of what Our Lady noticed, because she's a perfect woman, right? So Our Lady noticed there was no wine. Obviously, as probably as a steward here, she was keeping up with what needed to be taken care of. And she noticed it. It was the women who noticed it. It was the women who stood by the cross, not afraid like the men were. But just that service, right? That selflessness, where they didn't really put themselves or their needs or their wants ahead of what they felt other people might have needed to. And like, wow, you you merge this all together, and it just makes me, when you talk about this, I can't word this how I want to articulate, but when you talk about all these things, it really brings to light, I guess you can say, all of the perfect virtues that Our Lady must have possessed. Like, I don't think the human mind can almost grasp or imagine or understand really her perfections, just every single way. And that's what a woman should model herself after, not only in prayer, but just the way she conducted herself, the way she walked. I mean, everything. It was probably to the finest detail. And God says, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. We should strive.
It's a great point. And of course, on the flip side is St. Joseph. And I think that the last point for the men, I think, works well with him. And that last point is if I can find it, is personal integrity. You're the same person before God, in a crowd, or at home. So this was a hard one to define, because it's a hard one to really describe, but it means you are who you are.
Right.
And that comes with, obviously, it doesn't mean you're perfect. None of us are perfect, quite like Our Lady was, of course, but you have this integrity that you don't need to fake anything, And I think the people that we love the most, I'm sure you would say the same. We love the people the most who are the most natural and the most honest and the most, had the most integrity.
It was Fulton Sheen who said, "Careful not to live that double life," and it makes me think, how easy is that nowadays with social media, right? How many people are very outspoken or very bold in what they say and what they preach online, and then you come across them in person, it's like they wouldn't, say a word to anybody, which I understand, but we do have to be careful that we are who we are, and that integrity is huge. Like, does he speak up when something needs to be spoken up about? Does he intervene when there needs to be intervention? Like, how does he handle situations? I remember this video where a woman's car went off the road or whatever, and men were just kind of walking right by her. Like, nobody offered to help, nobody offered to make sure she was okay. That's part of that integrity. I think that you mentioned that a woman is going to notice, right? A woman who's looking for a true, genuine Catholic good husband is going to say, like, wow, he's aware. So many men are just blissfully unaware, right? Aware, me? And I think that's really come down to this generation that's really in their phones, which you and I don't think we didn't grow up that way.
No.
So very, very, very. Did you ever see that meme? It was like, thankful for a generation who played outside, and it was the kid at the ball game or whatever. The baseball bat goes flying into the stands, and the young kid doesn't notice, but the father catches the bat with the generation. That. But again, just being aware of everything and standing up for what is virtuous and right, and not being afraid to speak up when we need to. Cry out with 1,000 tongues. Saint Catherine of Siena said, "This world is rotten because of silence," and women notice that when men take action that way.
Well, and it all goes back. It wraps nicely to the bow of being God-fearing, because you won't know what's good and bad,
Yes.
what to stand up for and what not to stand up for, if you don't have that moral compass. And that moral compass, of course, is God and the Catholic Church. Now, we're going to keep moving on because we got 10 minutes. That was a very fascinating. I'd love to continue on this topic with you, Matt. I mean, totally. But
two
more topics. We're going to do it again. We'll have to talk about this again, because it's really extremely fascinating. I think talking about values and what men and women should be, because I think it's definitely an interesting topic. But let's move on. I think let's end. We're going to end with Bergoglio. So let's comment real quickly on something you kind of sent me right before the show, or I don't know, this morning.
Yeah.
And we're not going to comment that much on it, but it's interesting.
Yeah, so let me pull up the tweet here. It was Disclose TV, very popular news
German.
feed online. Oh, are they? I didn't
Yeah.
know that. They leaked a text message. Let me pull it up here. Yes, so you can verify this for yourselves. You can look online. You can go on Twitter, look up Disclose TV's at on Twitter. And the headline last night was, quote, this is the headline, new, so breaking news. Former UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock wanted to, quote, frighten the pants off everyone, end quote, into complying with ever-changing lockdown rules. So what they have here is, you can see it for yourself. It's a screenshot of text messages between two people. And I just want to read a part of the exchange here between these two high-ranking members of the British government here. This man named Damon Poole, he was texting Matt Hancock, the Secretary of Health, and he said, rather than doing too much forward signaling, we can roll pitch with the new strain. Matt Hancock replies, we frighten the pants off everyone with the new strain, but the complications with that Brexit thing is taking top line. Damon Poole wrote back, yeah, that's what will get proper behavior change. And Matt Hancock wrote back, here's the shilling line, when do we deploy the new variant? End quote there. I read that like 5 times. They're talking about this Brexit thing is getting in the way of what they're working on. They're talking about the variant. And then that last line, that clincher, when do we deploy the new variant? And the first thing that came into my mind was, what were these vaccines? If they truly did know that this was government lab created, as now it seems to really be leaking, what in the world was this panic over a vaccine for what they were somehow, some way spraying into the world? How
Let me
does this
ask
all
this.
tie together?
When do we deploy the Nuremberg trials? Yeah. I mean, this kind of stuff. I mean, this is, I think it's one of those things that we're all kind of conspiracy theorists, because that's what people label us. But when you start to see these things are coming true, and you start to see that the government, or at least parts of it, were actively against us, kind of like we've been saying, the conspiracy theorists have been saying for decades now. That's frightening. Even for me, that's frightening.
And like when I texted you, Kevin, your response back was, "And what's going to happen? Nothing." We both know it. You can go all the way back to. I mean, I'm just thinking of Hillary's emails, and obviously it goes way before that. But leak after leak after leak after leak. Laptop. I mean, you go on and on and on here. There's nothing comes of it. We just go on about our lives. Where's the balloons?
She took a hammer to a computer because she had been using her own computer to send top secret information. And when the FBI requested it, she took a hammer to it and nothing happened. Why? I mean, why do we even care anymore, Matt? Why do we even care? I mean, it's one of those things, like, you go down this road and it's like, it's such a joke. It's such a farce. The idea of that we live in this democracy is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Now, I know people are going to say, oh, Kevin, he's a lunatic. Look at these messages. Look, Hillary Clinton, she doesn't even deny she took a hammer to a computer that had top secret information on it. And then the media goes crazy about Trump having top secret information that he actually didn't have. So it's like, guys, it's a farce. The whole thing is a farce. So,
you remember her words, what difference does it make, right? Remember that? She shrugged her shoulders and said, what difference does it make? These are the people who are bloodthirsty to come after you. So
I would bet you that there's not a single member of parliament anywhere or any government that has personal integrity.
Going back to your list,
maybe in the world, and I mean, God-fearing, boy, I don't know, maybe.
Crazy. And it makes me wonder too, like, is there anybody who truly is sincere, like, in government? I'm having a harder and harder time believing it. I mean, maybe at a local level, maybe at these people who run for congressional districts and they get elected to the House, maybe, I don't know, but you see how it changes there too. This is way out there, but we had somebody who campaigned in my area, and she was a Democrat, but she was very much anti-Pelosi, kind of that train, right? We're the new wave of Democrats. We're tired of Nancy Pelosi. We're going to campaign on Nancy Pelosi, a new wave of progressivism. And the people here fell for it. Nancy Pelosi is not popular, even here amongst Democrats. This woman got elected, younger woman, to Congress. And the first thing that she did was stood on a platform and locked arms with Nancy Pelosi, and they campaigned forward. She was hammered by Democrats here because they pushed back on her, saying, "We elected you, we voted for you because you vowed not to do this to us." The same swamp that you said you would push back at, this new wave of Democrat Party that's infiltrating DC. That didn't last 5 minutes. So these people, they get in there, and I think they realize that they have to basically sell their souls. They have to obey the system if they want to last at all. And
Have you seen the
Yeah,
movie Mr. Smith Goes to Washington?
no.
Jimmy Stewart. So this was made back in the 1940s. Watch it. I recommend anyone to watch it. It's really fascinating because it is exactly what's going on today. You have a young guy who gets into government kind of on accident. He's super excited. And he's got all these dreams, and he goes in there with a hard work, and it ends up that everyone, that even the judges are bought and paid for, and I think by pharmaceutical companies, if I remember right. It's been a while since I've seen it, but it just shows very clearly the corruption of government and how, it's great to go in there with your tail on fire until you realize it's all bought and paid for. So, and this was back in the 1940s, Matt, or maybe 50s. I mean, it's a young Jimmy Stewart. So, really, really fascinating movie. I think it was appropriate. I don't think there was anything inappropriate in it. So I think I can recommend it. But you'll see that this goes back 80 years. So it's like, in
new.
the end,
It's not new.
It's not new. And I think that it's pretty ridiculous as we see these texts are absolutely insane. The guy should be put in prison at the least. And we know nothing's going to happen. We know it. Why do we know it? Because this stuff has happened in the past, and well, nothing's happened.
Where's the balloon? I don't hear about that anymore. These things just die, right? These crazy things that are just
because they're no longer fitting.
They're done with it, right?
Right, exactly. They're not fitting to the the establishment, and especially to the media, because the media just jumps on the next end of the world drama, because that's where the money comes in, and that's
so a Moose pop 'em, Kevin, 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. We left about 2 minutes left for Bergoglio, but we have next week. We can still talk on Sunday. Maybe that'll be our primary topic leading into the Monday evening show. So we have a live stream with Mario Dirksen. We got guests like Father Michael Oswald, Father Benedict Hughes. We have Louis Verrecchio, Stephen Spurey. We've got Intro Ebo already recorded a fantastic 15 minutes. You guys cannot wait to hear this 15 minutes from Intro Ebo. I think the rest is going to be just as good. That's going to be on Monday, not this Monday, the coming Monday, March 13th, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern time. Matt and I will be on, at least I assume, if Matt's available next week, we'll talk next week as well. And we'll have to cover Bergoglio. Do you have any 2-minute thoughts about the 10 years of Bergoglio?
Actually, I like you said, we can certainly jump in and chat more about this next week. But I remember at the time thinking of who I wanted to be elected, right? Because as I've shared before, Benedict was the quote unquote Pope that really just brought it all together for me, right? JP2 was older. He didn't move around a lot. He wasn't very mobile. And when I saw Benedict just steam on in there with the incense and the chant and just beautiful vestments, I was gung-ho. And I remember wanting, I don't know how many people are familiar with this name, but Malcolm Ranjith. He's a cardinal in Sri Lanka. A very strong proponent of the traditional mass. I believe he actually said some years ago at the time that opponents of the traditional mass are tools of Satan. He banned communion in his diocese. So I thought pretty solid guy. And I remember just beforehand, a friend of mine told me anybody but Bergoglio. And I didn't know who Bergoglio was. But I said, okay, well, I'll trust you. He knew way more than me. And I remember just that day, I don't know how long the conclave took, maybe 3. I don't think it was that long. It was fairly quick, maybe a few days, maybe. When the Annuncio said Bergoglio, I remember just this quietness among the crowd. If you remember, you can pull this up on YouTube as well. But if you remember when Ratzinger was elected Pope, air quotes, the crowd went wild, right? When they announced Bergoglio, there's an eerie silence there. And it's very telling. You could kind of catch that if you watch the clips. And I just remember thinking like, oh, I had this gut punch in my stomach. Kind of like, oh, this isn't right. Didn't know why. Didn't know what. Didn't know who. But I really can't wait to hear Mario and the rest talk about all this stuff, Kevin. So are we gonna be able to comment? Like, are you gonna have comments on, or what's the format?
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's gonna be live stream. Comments will be on
video.
On video.
Get your
Yeah,
tie
it's
ready.
gonna be, yes, sir. Yeah, it's gonna be
Iron your
quite the
shirts.
show. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm pretty nervous, mainly because of technical issues. As anybody who knows the show knows,
Yes.
if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. So say a prayer for that it all goes well, because I think, honestly, I think it could be big. I think there's going to be people who are. I just did just the 15 minutes with Intruibo about the occultism of Bergoglio. It's mind blowing. It's mind blowing. It shows that he cannot be a pope simply because he is a practicing pagan. Just wait until you hear this. I mean, it's just incredible stuff. And so that will be again on Monday the 13th at from 5 to 7 Eastern time. Matt, we will talk to you again next Sunday. We'll do a little preview show, maybe talking about Bergoglio, our own thoughts, your thoughts on him, and I'm sure we'll have some other lovely topic as well. Until then, Matt, we hope everyone enjoyed the show. If you did, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts. What do you think is a high value man or a high value woman? We appreciate your thoughts, and we look forward to hearing from him. Matt, till next week. God bless.